Hey gardeners, Amy here with Garden Up. Today I want to talk about the beast that you can't see from that shot, Boxwood Leafminer, or Monarthropalpus flavus. So if you've been watching my channel for a while, this may not come as much of a surprise. I really don't like boxwoods. It's a shame because they do make beautiful hedges, they do have a good use, like they're a beautiful plant. The problem is they are ripe with pests. They are a non-native shrub that brought with them a whole bunch of non-native pests with no natural controls over on this side of the pond. So whenever you get an infestation of boxwood leaf miners, there's no natural control in the United States that's going to keep that population in check. So they just grow and reproduce, and they're off to the races. They will eventually kill your boxwood. There are other pests that affect boxwoods, but the leaf miner is probably the most ecologically significant because it affects the boxwoods so much and so strongly, and it can actually kill boxwoods if the infestation gets so bad. There are also boxwood psyllids that make the leaves curl into little cups. Not such a big deal. There's boxwood blight, which is definitely a problem because it'll kill a boxwood, but it's not as common over here as it is in the UK where boxwoods are native. It does still happen, but not as often. And there's several other things that'll affect boxwoods. Spider mites is one. There's lots, but this video is about the boxwood leaf miner. It's a punk. To identify boxwood leaf miners is going to change depending on what time of the year it is. From July until about the end of the year, you're really not going to see much of anything. There's not much evidence that's visible in the summer or fall to say that these critters are in here. From about January until mid-May, when they emerge, you're going to start to see these big, gnarly yellow or orange splotches all over the leaves. And if you break them apart, you'll actually see in between the two layers of leaf, the epidermal layers of the leaves, you'll see these little gross maggots inside. They're going to be either yellow or orange. The more orange they are, the closer they are to pupating and emerging as adults. If they're yellow, they're still very juvenile and very young. When they emerge in mid to late May, you start to see this white stuff all over the leaves. These are the little bits of pupa left behind when they pupate and then they emerge as adults, and then the adults mate and they lay their eggs back in the leaves to start the cycle all over again. So the adults emerge, they mate, and then the females have what's called an ovipositor, which is like a little needle, like a syringe coming out of their butt. That's where their eggs come out of. They insert their ovipositor in the new growth of the boxwood, and they lay their eggs between the two epidermal layers of leaf tissue. And then those eggs hatch, they eat in between the leaves, which is why they're called miners, because they're mining little tunnels between the leaf layers.
Miners, not miners.
You lost me.
And they stay in there all year until the following spring when it's time for them to emerge and repeat the process. So those little buggers are protected. As long as they're inside those leaves, pretty much nothing can get to them. There's no predatory insects that can eat them when they're in there. Here, I'm going to come back to controls in a minute. But we don't have any kind of insects or natural controls that can eat these leaf miners when they are inside the leaves. What the adults look like is a tiny red fly. The insect is in the Diptera order, which is a fly. They are little tiny flies. They are little red flies. They honestly look like red mosquitoes. They're tiny little things that you'll see flying around for about 2 weeks in the second half of May. Usually they hatch sometime around May 20th or so, and they're done by the beginning of June. So their adult stage is so short-lived, and that's really the only time that you can get them with any normal controls. So again, that's why it's so difficult to control these insects. So now let's talk about controlling this pest. The best way to manage this pest is to not have boxwoods that are particularly susceptible to it. There are a few cultivars of boxwoods that are more resistant to boxwood leaf miners. They're not leaf miner proof, they're just less tasty to the leaf miners. That's the best way to describe it. So when you're shopping for a boxwood, Ask the nursery which varieties they have that are more resistant to leaf miner. Winter gem is one of the most common boxwoods we have for sale here in Spokane. It is not resistant. It is a magnet. So we love our winter gem boxwoods here in my area, but they will attract leaf miners if they're around. So that's not a good variety if you're trying to prevent this pest. Other cultural controls are to make sure your boxwoods are planted in the right place and they have the right kind of conditions that they like. They like full sun, they like lots of water, and they like good airflow. Make sure it's planted at the right depth and has good site conditions for, you make sure your plant is put in the right place. Those are your cultural controls. Natural controls, again, we don't have a predator that actually goes after this bug specifically, but ladybugs, lacewings, and spiders will eat them if they can catch them when they're in their adult stage. Problem is, the adult stage is so short-lived that that's not a reliable control that you can use. But it is part of an integrated pest management system, so I have to mention that. Mechanical controls, there's a few options here. Timed pruning. Okay, so I have been wanting to prune this for weeks. It's way too big. It's driving me insane. It's overgrowing its space. But I want these adult flies to lay their eggs in the tender new growth, and then I'm going to hedge it so that I physically remove all of the growth with those eggs. That's how you prune at the right time. You have to wait for the adults to emerge, do their thing, and then prune. Because if I were to prune this a few weeks ago before the adults emerged, they would have come out, because they still would have been in there. They would have emerged, they would have mated and laid their eggs on the old growth, because that's all they had. And then I would still have the problem. So I need to wait for the eggs to be laid and then do my hedging. So that's mechanical control number one. The other option, which is super tedious, so you're probably not going to do it, is literally to go around and squish all the maggots where they're in the leaves. Which is, so delicious. It's very satisfying to feel that squish. Yummy, yummy, yummy. But you're talking thousands and thousands of leaves on each boxwood. You're not going to do that. That's unrealistic. If you only have one or two leaves that are affected, maybe, but that's highly unlikely. But it's very effective if you have nothing better to do on January afternoon. So I'm going to say, unfortunately for this, the best method of control for these pests is chemical. And the only one that's guaranteed to get this bugger is a systemic. There's not really an organic that's going to do it. There are some organics that have some degree of efficacy. The only organic that I've heard of that has any efficacy against this at all is spinosad, and I'm not positive even how effective it is. So you're probably gonna go and get a synthetic chemical for this because it's what works. If you want to keep your boxwoods, you're gonna want to do what's gonna work. And unfortunately, sometimes synthetic chemicals are what is necessary to control certain pests. If you choose to use a pesticide, make sure to follow the label instructions. The label is the law. Do not change those label instructions. 1, it's what's the safest. 2, it's what works. So follow the instructions. Go to your local garden center and ask the experts there. We're talking a real garden center, not in a department store. Ask the experts there what chemicals they have that'll be appropriate for this insect, and they'll be able to direct you and advise you on how to use those chemicals. One more note on imidacloprid, the neonicotinoid. Neonics are the pesticide that is doing so much damage to honeybees and other bee populations because they can kill bees in really awful ways, honestly. So this is not a recommendation I make lightly. Do not apply that chemical on anything that's blooming or around anything that's blooming, because if the bees get into it, that's how and why they will die. But if you apply it correctly and only to a plant that has no blooms on it, it should be safe to use. One more chemical that I have used and that I'm using this year is my standby is dish soap. The problem with dish soap is you have to spray the bugs themselves, which means you have to spray them while they're flying around. There is a new emergence of new insects every day and even several times a day. So unless you have nothing better to do than to stand out here and spray these things with dish soap several times a day, it's not going to be an effective method. It will reduce the populations of new eggs a little bit, but it's not going to control the whole pest. So thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope this video was valuable to you. If you learned something, make sure to tell me by hitting the like button. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do that so that you'll get more gardening content in your video feed every week. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the garden.